After pouring my life into the original NieR almost a decade ago now, I had convinced myself that whatever my desires may be, the chance of there ever being a specific follow-up to the game I adored was pretty much non-existent. Because for all its quality, NieR was the very definition of niche, and as much as I loved it, this industry is ultimately a numbers game, and NieR just didn't review that well, or sell that well. A double whammy. In retrospect, there are certain aspects that were just very off-putting. I mean, let's be honest, those graphics left much to be desired, especially when it compared to other games releasing around the same time, like Heavy Rain, which was fantastic, even if Jason was a little
Jason!
Critics and gamers alike also felt the gameplay was not up to snuff, and when you appreciate that it was going up against games like Bayonetta, Red Dead Redemption, and Mass Effect 2, it's not that difficult to understand why. Now though, sitting here almost 10 years later, it's oddly satisfying to see that NieR has become something of a modern hidden gem. Times have changed and the appreciation for what NieR did right has grown. Because while some elements were rather substandard, there are many aspects of NieR that still surpass games that are even releasing right now. The storytelling, for example, was extremely good, featuring a fully fleshed out cast of characters, a rich world, and a compelling narrative, and by the end of the game, especially if you went for ending D, you would just be left feeling rather perplexed, but in a good way. Keiichi Okabe, who I'd been somewhat familiar with due to his work on the Tekken franchise, also did such a good job alongside the other composers from Monaka as they worked with vocalist Emmy Evans to ensure that even today, NieR's original soundtrack is still looked on as nothing short of a masterpiece. But due to this rather mixed bag of a gaming experience, and its many unflattering reviews, sales naturally weren't that stellar. In its original run, NieR managed to sell 134,000 copies in Japan, and although we never got any actual numbers for the Western sales, it can be assumed that they weren't great. Something which Yokoyama Yuki, an assistant producer on NieR, alluded to in an interview from back in 2015. It meant that NieR was just another game in a long line of other new IPs at the time that were deemed as failures, like the rather curious Alpha Protocol from Sega and the highly praised Enslaved Odyssey to the West from Bandai Namco. It's why I didn't expect to see much more from this Drakengard spin-off, even if Drakengard 3 did get the green light over at Square Enix a few years later. So I'm sure that you can appreciate that I was overcome by an odd sense of anticipation when, during Square Enix's E3 press conference back in 2015, both Yosuke Saito and Yoko Taro, the producer and director respectively of NieR, sauntered onto the stage. When they then proceeded to announce NieR new project, that anticipation quickly became giddy excitement and, well, general bewilderment, which is quite often the feeling I get whenever I see Yoko Taro in general doing anything, like this rather odd marketing video. It's Square Enix, indeed. But what exactly did this announcement mean? Would we be seeing a direct sequel to NieR, or something else entirely? Well, it turned out to be a game that sat right in the middle, as although NieR Automata, as it would later be named, was officially marketed as a sequel, in literal terms, the narrative similarities are loose. It also turned out to be freaking amazing, and its impact has been huge. NieR Automata has recently surpassed 3.5 million copies sold worldwide, and more importantly, it has shown just what the franchise is capable of when it's properly supported. One of the interesting challenges that this has presented is that people have naturally become more interested in Automata's predecessor, and you can see this reflected by the fact that NieR has actually now managed to sell more than 700,000 copies worldwide. But the original game is becoming harder and harder to come by. In the West at least, NieR's price had seen some significant fluctuations on Amazon, due to it now only being sold by third-party sellers, and with it being relatively unpopular, finding it in your local game store is also somewhat unlikely. And for some reason, Square Enix has also chosen not to sell NieR digitally on either the PlayStation or Xbox stores, and it's never been offered to PC gamers. It means that if we're going down the conspiracy theory route, it could hint that Square Enix is already gearing up for something related to NieR, like maybe a remake or a remaster. The thing is that remakes and remasters in themselves are a tricky subject. but due to where NieR fell down, it seems like a logical candidate for a full-on remake, as it would be the perfect way to allow people to experience the original in all its splendor. I'd always wondered, what if NieR had been developed by a top-tier development company like PlatinumGames? Because many of the elements that detracted were superficial, but they added up. Caveat, with all due respect to them, were never a high-class developer, and they had a reputation for developing budget-looking games. Bullet Witch, for example, released as an Xbox 360 exclusive, but was recently released on Steam for some reason, was a classic example of this, as it suffered quite heavily from poor graphics. With NieR, the character models looked jarring, as if they didn't belong, with facial expressions that were often unnerving. The environments were quite empty, and I felt like most of the game was spent in a high-contrast Instagram filter, and not a good one. Critics also weren't afraid to call out the faults of NieR's, style. Wired, for example, gave a rather backhanded compliment by saying, "The characters look a lot better than the geography, but NieR isn't going to wow you visually." GameSpot also chose to be rather harsh with their comparisons, saying, "NieR's excellent soundtrack has infinitely more character than the flavorless visuals." Even more positive reviews rained down the hate on this particular aspect. IGN were very blunt in this regard, saying, "At the risk of sounding like a broken record, NieR is ugly." It's something that Yoko Taro and Yosuke Saito took to heart. They trawled through countless reviews from customers and critics and heard the feedback loud and clear. So when it came to NieR Automata, they agreed that the graphics needed to be improved as one of their most important tasks. The result? Well, you can see for yourself. The environments feel lush, the lighting feels more natural, the characters all look as though they belong in the world. It's believable, unlike the models of the original NieR. They even managed to stick in similar environments to the original NieR, like the fallen city, a lush forest, and a sandy desert. They all just looked exponentially better in Automata. So if they could just revamp the environments and characters of NieR to the level of Automata, it would make all the difference. Likewise, from a gameplay perspective, NieR was just your typical action RPG. Button mash your way to glory, and make use of the sealed verses, which you can learn by filling Grimoire Vice with knowledge. To be blunt, it paled in comparison to what was offered in NieR Automata, which not only featured extremely tight controls, like we come to expect from PlatinumGames due to releases like Bayonetta and Vanquish, but also had more comprehensive RPG elements for how you wanted to build out your character. Due to this system, you could tailor the experience more heavily to match your own personal gameplay style, and seeing something similar attached to the original would be a joy. NieR also attempted to experiment with other gameplay genres. For example, there are a few sections that play more like a platformer. There's a classic Resident Evil style horror section, and some moments were completely text-based. I hope that perhaps should a remake happen, these sections are kept in, at least in some capacity, but built upon thanks to a healthy serving of PlatinumGames. Modifying the game in this way would make sure that its core, the character, story, world, and music, could be kept faithful, while the other elements could be revamped to what you'd expect from a modern game. Which, in my mind, is exactly what you'd expect from a remake. It's faithful to what came before, but modernizes where it makes sense to do so. My perfect example of this would be Resident Evil 2. This took a lot of the successful elements from the original game, but modernized it where it made sense to do so. The results speak for themselves. Another example would be Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes, a remake of Metal Gear Solid that released on the GameCube. Many of the features which had been implemented within Metal Gear Solid 2 were integrated into the Twin Snakes, which meant that players were able to experience the original game, but with some nice new luxuries. Additional benefits for a NieR remake could also include a language pack for other languages, as the original was only offered in English or Japanese. There's also an opportunity to offer both versions of NieR, so you could select to either play Gestalt, where the story followed NieR as a father of Yona, or Replicant, which was only available on the PS3 in Japan, and had NieR as the older brother of Yona. Furthermore, they could finally make NieR available digitally on the PlayStation Store, Xbox Store, and Steam. Automata released on Steam, and managed to sell between 500,000 and 1 million copies according to Steam Spy. why not take advantage of these extra audiences? To me, this seems like a no-brainer. NieR is a fantastic game that was let down by elements that a developer such as PlatinumGames would easily be able to fix. If it had been given the same love and attention back then, who knows what it might have achieved. And when you consider that a maximum of 20% of the people who bought NieR Automata would have played NieR, based on their respective sales, that is surely a rather compelling case in itself. NieR is and always will be one of the most important games that I've ever played, but unfortunately I do still think it suffers from its looks and how it's played. This game has one of the best stories of its generation, along with a fantastic soundtrack. All it needs is some polishing and then it could be one of the greatest games of our time. Please, Square Enix, I'm begging you to greenlight a NieR Remake if you haven't already started. I need to hear Laura Bailey scream out lines of profanity. I need to spend hours planting flowers and fishing for legendary fish once again, all just to have it completely blown away with the game's D ending. There's now over 3.5 million people out there who have purchased Automata, but only a fraction of them would have played NieR. I would love it if Square Enix could remake it in the same style as Automata and let people enjoy the game how it should have been. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. As you probably gathered, I'm very passionate about NieR, and I genuinely hope that the franchise can continue to flourish no matter what they decide to do. I feel as though making the original more widely available will only help to work along with this. But if they'd rather focus their time and efforts on other new endeavors, then that's perfectly fine too. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. I appreciate that this video is a bit of a change of pace compared to our regular content, but it's just something that's been rolling around in my brain for a while and I just wanted to get it out there. My hope is that I can continue doing this kind of thing, and any support you can offer would therefore be much appreciated. On that note, we've just revamped our Patreon, and you can now support our channel for just $1 per month. One of the other things we're now offering is behind the scenes content, where Daryl and I talk about how we create our videos. For example, Daryl just posted up a behind the scenes MIDI podcast talking about the process we go through for selecting our Origins video topics. It's something that we get asked quite a bit. One of our next ones will be on script writing, so be sure to sign up if you're interested. Also, you can get your name listed at the end of our videos like these wonderful people here. The link to our Patreon is in the description below. Alright everyone, that's enough of me rambling. If you're interested in playing the original NieR, I wish you well in your quest in obtaining it. Until next time, this is Lauren signing out. See you soon!